One day in 1992, a man robbed two banks in Jersey at daylight. He didn't wear a mask or any sort of false appearance. And he smiled at monitoring cameras before walking out of each bank. Of course the police catched the robber and immediately to 12 hours after robbery, arrested him. Interestingly, when the robber was handcuffed, he was surprised. And he griped, "But I wore the juice on my face." It would seem that bank robber thought that covering lemon juice on his face would provide him invisible to bank's security cameras. And he didn't just think that, he was pretty sure about it. His rationale is that, since the chemical properties of lemon juice are used in invisible ink, it should provide him invisible to the bank security cameras. This is obviously a completely dumb way of thinking. Hee. But what's interesting is that, even after the police showed him the camera image of his robbery, he was really surprised that it didn't work and he thought the images was fake. The police discovered that this man was not crazy or on drugs, just extremely misinformed. The funny robbery invite two social psychologists, Dunning-Kruger, to study this phenomenon more seriously. Specifically what interested them the most, was the faith exerted by this robber, that made him believe he'd be able to keep from the security cameras with just lemon juice. Why is the Dunning-Kruger effect important? The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that the most competent people tend to underestimate their ability. But, more importantly, the effect shows that unskilled or incompetent people tend to overestimate their abilities. To examine this in the lab, they examined a group of undergraduate students in several categories. Their grammar, writing, logical reasoning and a sense of humor. After knowing the test scores, they asked each student to forecast his or her overall score, as well as their relative rank compared to other students. This is when Dunning-Kruger discovers something fascinating. They realized that the students who scored the lowest in these cognitive tasks, always overestimated how well they did. And not just by a little, but by a lot. They thought they had scored above average, while their score was the lowest. So not only were those students incompetent or less skilled in those areas, but they obviously didn't even know just how bad they were at them. Students who scored the highest, had more accurate perceptions of their abilities, but they made a different mistake. Paradoxically, the highest scoring students underestimated their performance. They knew they were better than average at the test. But because it was easy for them, they assumed it was easy for everyone. They didn't know that their ability was at the top percentile. Today this phenomenon is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Essentially, low-ability people do not possess the skills. Their poor self-awareness leads them to overestimate their own capabilities. You can clearly see what I mean in this graph here. Having barely any skill or knowledge, leads to massive confidence. However, when you become more knowledgeable about a certain topic, that confidence falls. Only when you start to reach above average skill, is when your confidence about a certain topic starts to pick up again. Contrary to popular belief, this is not just limited to cognitive tasks. It doesn't seem to matter what specific skill we pick. The less a person knows about any given activity, the more likely they are to overestimate their skill or knowledge. The Dunning-Kruger effect can be observed during talent shows like American Idol. The auditions are usually filled with a variety of good and bad singers. The ones who are bad at it, almost never realize how bad they really are. That's why they're truly disappointed when they get rejected. The truth is, we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, the majority of people believe that they are better than average. 85% of people think that they're better drivers than the majority. And even elderly people rank themselves among the best drivers. A more interesting example is that more than 90% of professors assume that they are better in comparison to their colleagues. We judge ourselves as better than others, to a degree that violates the laws of math. But why? Why does being less skilled make you more confident in your abilities? I'm trying to help you visualize how this happens. This is Diego. He's an amateur photographer. And this box represents how much he knows about photography. And this is how big he thinks the field is and how much there is to know about it. With this reasoning, he's easily at the top percentile of all photographers. But let's say he meets a professional photographer, someone who has been doing it for 7 years. But he still has a lot to learn. This photographer knows this much about photography. But he also knows that the field is much larger, and there's this much to know about it. Because this photographer is more knowledgeable about the subject, he knows that this gray area exists. However, Diego does not. Now you can see why Diego is so confident in his ability. He has no idea, just how much he doesn't know. Because he only has a little knowledge of the field, he doesn't know that it's way more extensive than that. And because he doesn't know what he doesn't know, he thinks he knows 90% about photography. Meanwhile, on the other hand, experts tend to be aware of just how knowledgeable they are. But they often make a different mistake. They assume that everyone else is knowledgeable as well. Mostly because others apply so much confidence. In this instance, the photographer is aware he only knows about 70%. But if he met someone like Diego, he would underestimate himself. 90% is better than 70%. After all, we are all susceptible to the Dunning-Kruger effect. But how can we prevent ourselves from falling prey to it? Well, the answer is, you should strive to educate yourself as much as possible. You're not expected to know everything after all. Thinking you're always right is a clear sign of foolishness. It seems that the more knowledge you have, the more you realize how little you know in reality. In other words, the more you know about a certain issue, the more you realize how complicated, unexplored and extensive it is. And how many things you do not understand or know yet. It's a beautiful paradox in which the more we study something, the less we know about it. On the other hand, people who dabble on the surface of anything they pursue, will never know how much they still have to learn. In the Dunning-Kruger experiment, unskilled or incompetent students improved their ability to correctly estimate the test results after receiving minimal tutoring on the skills they lacked. It's helpful to have someone who is ahead of you show you what you have yet to learn. So next time you feel confident that you know a lot about something, take a closer look at the topic, as it could be that you are a victim of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You just might not know what you don't know. How do you know if you have the Dunning-Kruger effect? Tend to overestimate their own level of skill. Fail to recognize actual skill in others. Fail to recognize how heavy is their insufficiency. Recognize and acknowledge their own previous lack of skill. If they can be trained to substantially improve. What causes the Dunning-Kruger effect? Confidence is so highly prized that many people would rather pretend to be smart or skilled than risk looking inadequate and losing face. Even smart people can be affected by the Dunning-Kruger effect. Because having intelligence isn't the same thing as learning and developing a specific skill. Many individuals mistakenly believe that their experience and skills in one particular area are transferable to another. Why do people overestimate their competence? Overestimation, another kind of overconfidence, refers to the discrepancy between someone's skills and their perception of those skills. People who overestimate themselves frequently engage in wishful thinking with harmful consequences. If someone overestimates their capabilities, they may take dangerous risks and overextend themselves beyond their limits, like an athlete pushing themselves to the point of injury. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Thank you, my dear.